everyone. So, welcome to the final series of this LockedIn My Challenge. We're saving the best one for the last, and we got Rayyan with us today. So, yeah, Rayyan, go on and introduce yourself a bit.
Yeah, what's up, everyone? My name is Rayyan Aquino. I'm a senior in Mason, Ohio, and I'm founder of Virtuoso, kind of the Duolingo for music producers. I'm also just a very multifaceted engineer. Anything between hardware and software, I just love doing and love exploring and building different things. And one of my passions and kind of hobbies that I figured out through like exploring all of these different engineering fields is Formula One. So hope today to talk a little bit about how you can start your Formula One team, and what that means for startup founders.
Definitely. So, let's get straight into it.
Yeah. So today I just wanted to introduce kind of a concept of um, how to really how Formula One teams kind of start, and the reason being is because Formula One is pretty much kind of following the same rules and regulations as how you start a startup and get your own business running. And I certainly feel that Formula One is one of the best sports and most likely the only sport you should be watching as a startup founder. And that is for many, many reasons. So I just wanted to draw a couple of comparisons, show you how this information can be used, and what takeaways and lessons you can learn as a startup founder from anywhere. So, to give you the rundown of what we're doing, Formula One in 2026 has gone through so many changes. So, the first thing that we're going to do is reverse engineer the obvious. We're just going to take what we know so far and kind of just use a couple of examples that are currently happening during this season and kind of figure out what we actually want to do with that. And then draw those important connections and see actually why you're already running a Formula One team as a founder. You just might know it yet. So let's get into it. Um, so I want to give you just a couple of numbers to give you like a good background of how the sport works. So these are the numbers you should remember. There are 2 drivers a team, 11 teams on the grid, and that means that there's 22 drivers total, over 24 races across the globe, fighting for one spot to be the world champion. So 22 different cars all on one track, fighting across so many different tracks, whether that's Singapore, Japan, Australia, or the US. Like, it is very, very high stakes. There's a lot of high stakes engineering that goes behind how the cars operate, and the drivers have to make a lot of cutthroat decisions in hundreds and thousands of a second. And I mean, you're going really fast, experiencing a ton of G force, and it's really, really cutthroat, really, really high stakes. I like to say that when you're kind of building a startup, you're kind of just playing with the same probability, like of 1 to 2% probability of really succeeding, or just having it being very life threatening too. I mean, you are putting a lot of stuff on the line. So that's a little bit how the sport works, but it's also important about to know who is really behind the sport in the background. So you got to really think that there are about 300 engineers working in the headquarters of every single team. Most of them are in the UK, just designing the car for the next year, a year before. And you have people ranging from aerodynamicists to design engineers to quality engineers to product and outreach to growth, and all of these different people working in the background. You got your travel team of mechanics and race engineers. That's probably about 150 that travel all around the world. And you're going to have all of those people supporting your 3 drivers, your 2 main ones, and your reserve one. And this is what I call like, that's why it's always good to have as a founder just kind of a second opinion. That's what I call the reserve driver, is the second opinion, so that all the engineers can really understand, hey, what aspect does the car actually need some improvements on? What upgrades do we need to do in the mid-season? What we actually have to continue to work on so that we're the fastest on the grid. And then Each driver gets their own personal race engineer that that helps them throughout the race, lets them know what the strategy of the race is, and kind of make sure that we're on the right track with tire efficiency and that the strategy and operations is all good to go. And then you have the one guy at the top, which is the team principal. I got Toto Wolf up there at the far right. He's my favorite team principal. He's actually done a lot of different things with Harvard Business School. I think he guest lectured and is featured on a couple of articles, and it talks about how to really manage and lead a team. I feel like as you grow as a founder, being a founder isn't so much as the same as being a manager, right? So because you could really start you had the idea and you could really start the company, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have all of the skill set to actually manage and lead the team to grow. So there are a couple of different skills that you might want to actually understand between being a founder and a manager, because it's not just about um, how you manage different assets, but it's also about leading people to a certain goal. And of course, Formula One, you have to make some very tough decisions very, very fast. So knowing who's behind it is definitely the most important thing. Okay. Now let's reverse engineer the obvious. And I say at $1 billion because we have a brand new team on the grid this season. We had Cadillac Formula One. It's a completely new entry onto the grid. And Cadillac is doing that for many, many reasons. One, it's a huge publicity stunt since the sport has like really, really grown over the past 2 to 3 years in the US. And Cadillac is kind of just capitalizing on that to make sure that they get a piece of that pie there. But in order to get a piece of the Formula One pie, it does kind of cost almost $1 billion to start up, and that's what it has costed them. Even though they're hiring very experienced drivers, even though they have their own in-house engineers and full engineering team, brand new headquarters, all of that is very, very costly. And um, as they move and look at their 5-year plan and their vision, it is going to cost even probably double or triple that as they continue to build that vision. But even though it's $1 billion, for the last probably 3 races, they've been at the back of the pack. They've been trying to improve. They've been just kind of crawling and driving to survive, essentially. So um, even though you kind of have this whole professional team on there, it's still very hard to start and very hard to grab that traction. So I actually wanted to share a little bit of what's behind starting, and it's kind of a little bit. This is where some of the similarities with startups kind of reside, is because you are swimming upstream for your first 3 years. Um, and part of that is knowing how to ship this thing fast, right? 2026 is a very, very peculiar year for Formula One. I'll say peculiar because we have a lot of different opinions about how the sport has changed. There are brand new regulations um, with how the cars need to be built. Now, the reason Formula One is called Formula One is because it's a formula series, meaning that each of the teams have to follow a certain rules and regulations on how to build their cars. Not everyone is racing in the same car. That's why you have all the engineers making sure that the car is designed to be the fastest possible. But this whole system was not profitable until 2021. It was not profitable at all. Every single team, including the legacy teams, were actually operating at a loss. And in 2021, when the cost cap was introduced and teams were only allowed to, um, you know, just purchase a certain amount of materials that they could have to kind of design the car or kind of have their cost reduced, that's when we started to see Formula One teams actually start making a profit, and that's for many reasons. I'm going to go into a lot of different ones that are kind of interesting, but the cost cap is the main one. As you see here, the legacy team, Ferrari, is making, not the most profit, but it is making a positive operating profit. I think these numbers are from 2022, and the valuation is absolutely humongous. But when you're talking about a starting team like Cadillac, they don't get too much of that financial pie. First and foremost, they have to pay a $450 million fee to all of the 10 teams to actually be on the grid. So that is a huge barrier of entry. And I feel like 450 million is the number that I even repeat to myself as a founder, right? Because even though our barrier to entry now is kind of like shipping fast in a week, you only have like, you can only go so fast. So you want to be able to utilize as many different things as possible, as many different resources that are already present. And for me, I like the saying, put it all on red, because Cadillac is the one that actually followed that. You see, there are two main things that you really want to be focusing on when you're building a Formula One car. Usually, you have a team working on the car itself, whether that's the aerodynamics of it or any of the different systems within the car, especially to support and assist the driver. But then you also have a team specifically working on the engine, or what we call the power unit. Now, not every team manufactures their own power unit. Ferrari does, Mercedes does, but take a team like McLaren, last year's constructors champions, they actually just used Mercedes engine. And Cadillac put it all on red for the first couple of years by using Ferrari's engine and just saying, we're going to use something that we know is definitely going to be high performing and already works. And that I feel like is what we are using as founders now when it comes to vibe coding. We are going on already the systems that work, the systems that know how to do it, so that way we can get on the grid as fast as possible. We can start racing as fast as possible. And that kind of reduces our barrier to entry. And it's okay to be on these crutches, such as putting it all on red first, right? Even though Cadillac is starting out, remember I already said that they're at the back of the pack. And it's okay to be at the back of the pack and on crutches and start to develop these different things as you go on, right? And we always talk about shipping fast, but it's also important to note that you're going to ship fast with the most minimum viable stuff as possible. So it's okay to be on those crutches. You just have to realize that, so that way you can get and understand that you can get to the full distribution later. I do want to note though that you don't want to be afraid either to like bother the big guys. So just one quick note is that Audi is a new team on the grid as well this year. They not so much Cadillac, they're not brand new. They bought out another team and they're not afraid to challenge the top teams and make sure that they're actually, competing with them. So I find that very interesting because let's say you're like trying to be in a super super competitive market as a founder, whether that's I think like AI study tools for example. um don't be afraid to like pick a fight with Turbo AI or one of the big guys and try to put against them. If you really do believe in your product, you'll be able to do that. Now, I do want to talk about a little bit of what is also behind the profitability of Formula One teams, and that has to go. We'll kind of go on like the 2016 trend and talk about what Formula One was like 10 years ago. Um, because here's the interesting thing: in startups and tech in general, we're going through what I like to call the growth revolution, right? We're talking about sharing authentic stories like on LinkedIn. That's one of our biggest focuses in LockedIn. We're also talking about like UGC and more personalized content and marketing. But almost 10, 11 years ago, Formula One already went through that growth revolution because the rights to Formula One when it comes to streaming and the races were actually purchased by a company called Liberty Media in 2017. Before this purchase, Formula One was all about exclusivity, right? It was a upper echelon sport. Drivers did not have the social media presence that they have now, and it wasn't really a super accessible sport outside of Europe or the places that they were racing. So if you didn't really have prior knowledge and you were in a place like the US, it was very hard to really access Formula One. But with the media purchase in 2017 and the cost cap helping the finances, we had this kind of insane revolution. The teams were profitable and they were no longer super exclusive. The drivers are starting to access social media and build their personal brands, kind of share their personalities more than what we see, and kind of connect with the fans, kind of build um, these these different personalities that were like just really upgraded your experience as a fan. And I have an example up here as Daniel Ricciardo, who's probably one of the most comedic and fun drivers to watch um, all over social media. He was super funny, but he was also brought excellent performances to the grid. He was also such a great racing driver, and you kind of had that duality, and it brought a lot more value to the teams themselves and a lot more value to watching the sport because you kind of just have this duality where I feel more connected to the drivers and the racing teams, but I'm also enjoying the sport and the competitiveness of it as a whole. And I feel like when you add different things like the Netflix series Drive to Survive, and you kind of have this full picture of how the sport works and operates, and you have all these personal brands working all at once, you get this fully functional chaos of racing all across the world, and it's so much fun to watch. And I feel like because Formula One went through that revolution almost 10 years ago, and now we're starting to see the change in startups, we might see a lot more different trends and try to see, I don't know where we'll be in the next 2 to 3 years when it comes to tech startups, just because of how much Formula One has changed in the last 10. Okay. So for the final connections as a founder, I know I've rambled a lot and made a lot of pretty cool connections and showed how we actually, kind of borrowed a lot from a lot of the Formula One revolutions and the moving fast, operating fast metaphors. But in reality, like what this is about is taking in lessons from everywhere you look as a founder. I feel like one of the things that hinders founders when it comes to growing their startup and more so growing themselves is the ego that we carry. I feel like we need to be putting ourselves in rooms where we can listen to every single perspective as much as possible, right? And that could mean taking lessons from a sport like Formula One, or that could mean joining communities like LockedIn, where you kind of get to just listen and talk to people from all over the world and get those different perspectives and take in those lessons and make those connections so that you can develop and uplift your own journey. I mean, my first coffee chat with anyone from LockedIn was with Gerald, and hashtag free Gerald, please LinkedIn unban this guy. But it it kickstarted me into this um, just habit of learning from different perspectives and understanding different perspectives and applying that to my own journey. So, in my opinion, yes, you should only be watching Formula One as a startup founder, but take as many lessons from everywhere as much as possible. And when you do that, you're going to figure out that this journey is going to be so much richer and so much more fun. So that's about all I have. I'm just going to open it up to any questions. So,
Okay, yeah, Ryan. Thank you very much for this presentation. And to be honest, I haven't been really like looking in any into F1 before, but I just hear a lot of people mentioning it here and there. So actually, after the presentation, I would say like you mentioned how in 2021 it was how like the F1 started to become attractive and profitable, but before
mhm.
that, actually not really like no one really watches it, right? Because of the exclusivity.
Right. I mean, it still had like a decent fan base and had a very strong fan base because it's been able to survive for 75 years. But the reach that it has now is you can't even compare the two. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think yeah, personally after your presentation, my first thing I got in mind was like, cause like actually you know how everyone around me, when I ask them, okay, what do you like about F1? They don't know. They can't answer me. No one can answer me anything, and I'm like, and I feel like the whole F1 is a very dedicatedly like a marketing scheme, or like a kind of like they are selling like not the sport, but like kind of the status. Oh, what do you watch? Oh, I like football. Oh, well, I like F1. So like that, I would say that's just like the vibe of what F1 gives me. I feel like because a lot of the times when I ask like why do you like F1, and they can't respond to that. They just like, oh like that. So yeah, but what's your thought on this? One love to know.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like there's somewhat of performative aspect when it comes to a couple
Mhm.
of Formula One fans. I feel like a lot of people kind of just role play that they are one, or just like performatively say, because that exclusive brand kind of still definitely exists, and it's still rooted in what it is. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the oldest races is in Monaco, and I mean, you think about it, you just have all of these millionaires, billionaires watching the race on their yachts. I mean, and that like legacy and that exclusive taste kind of just mirrors down to just people wanting to be a part of that kind of persona of it.
Mhm.
But I mean, F1 has kind of diverged just a little bit from it, just to be, you know, more
Yep.
growth have a more like wider growth aspect, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, cause yeah, uh, like the people who I talk to who likes F1 just knows the name and the car, and that's it. And yeah, but anyways, let's go on to the next question. Like you mentioned how use working systems, the brand, I forgot, catalog, right? They're using like working systems instead of like developing their own. And I think like this really applies to a lot of the things, like for your example, the thing you mentioned, vibe coding. But like uh sometimes you're just like using the best way to start in a new niche or anything would be to copy or like replicate some existing working systems, and as you get more familiar with it, I feel like you just add in some of your personal traits, your strengths, or like some new ideas, and that's how like interconnectedness of any form of like creation. It's just like an existing framework, and you just add a bit, and then someone takes that and adds a bit. And I think this is just how things work. So yeah, my question to you is like, what do you think about like the trend of F1? What How do you see it, like the upcoming growth of it? And
Like F1 as a brand, you mean? Like kind of just how it's going to grow in the
yeah,
future?
I'd love
Well,
to hear your take on this one.
I definitely think within the next 2 years, there's going to be a lot of good growth. I mean, right now, we're kind of under a lot of controversy because of the new technical regulations. That's making the legacy fan base, kind of just apathize the sport a little bit. They're like, why are all these changes happening? And then
Okay.
some of the newer fan base and that growing fan base is just getting started, and this is their first introduction to it, so they're kind of really enthusiastic about it. I
Mm-hmm.
think both of these fan bases are going to converge within the next like technical cycle, because like these technical changes happen like every 4 to 5 years depending on what the governing body of the sport kind of decides. And I feel like that's also similar to like tech startups that way, where it's kind of like you have to adapt it to change super super quickly. um I mean, AI 2 to 3 years ago would had like an entirely different we had an entire different mindset around it than we do now. So I mean, it's just adapting to that, but I feel like the best growth and is definitely yet to come. I would give it 2 years in my opinion.
Yeah, sounds good. And have you been to any F1 games so far?
I have not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, I really want to go to Canada or Austin this year.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that we'll be able to go to either of those because they're nearby for me, so it's
Yep, yep.
not an issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard it's a completely different experience in person. Would
Definitely.
love to.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like what I'm really interesting after you like the presentation would be like the business model or kind of like the marketing. Like I feel like let's go back to the slide of where you mentioned no, not this one. Yep. So the
That
Liberty Media
one.
purchase, I
Yeah.
think like in a few years it's probably them to like bringing this revolutionize like UGC kind of thing. So like having the uh races to post on their own, and then like yeah, I saw like some tests they're doing like agility. Do you know like if they, and I think it's really cool that there's like 300 or 400 people and behind the team of one car.
Yeah.
That's like I didn't know that. I thought it's like you only see like the 4 or 5 people, but every team behind is a big company or something.
Pretty much.
And then like here I would
And
say pretty cool as well. Like 3 billion of Ferrari, but the operating profit is 50 million. How much is that? Like that's
oh,
actually
like so the funny part about the finances of it is that the Formula One itself, like, and I would say the FAA, which is the governing body, they kind of just pay each of the teams like a certain amount of their own profit,
Mhm.
which a few billion every year, casual. But um, the weird thing and the extra obstacle that it is for a lot of the teams is that the legacy teams get the most cut. So Ferrari actually gets the most gift kind of aid from Formula One itself because they've been in it for so long, 16 drivers champions, they have the most credibility, the most history. Then it comes like
Yeah,
Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, all the other ones kind of get that hash of finance. So for a newer team to go in and have to pay instead of receive, it is twice as difficult to even make a profit. So
yeah, really. And
yeah,
I feel, do you agree? Like, it's probably like it's the advertisement if the teams want to go in, and it's more of the marketing value instead of the.
I'd say it's definitely. First of all, I feel like it's kind of just a sport for fun. Like the profit making part of it is just so brand new. I mean, if you're thinking about it, it's like only 4 or 5 years old, and the most of the logic behind it is like what you're saying. The traditional marketing. Look at the marketing on the cars, right? They're just absolutely dosed in stickers, and then just the marketing of the brands themselves. I mean, look at the number three brand and one of the best teams in Formula One is Red Bull, and they own two teams. So they are really into that marketing, and that's part of their brand as well. And then yeah, I mean it's definitely marketing, and even for a team like Haas, the company makes like CNC manufacturing machines. That's kind of like steel mill subtractive manufacturing machines. They're in the steel business.
Yep.
Somehow they have a Formula One team, and that helps with the
Mm.
marketing. So that's kind of like the overlap. And I mean, some of these are car companies. It makes obvious sense. Some of
Mm.
these are like Haas and Red Bull, where it's like, how come you're here? So yeah, I would definitely say that's a huge part of it, and it was one of the main targets. Now the probability is kind of coming in this. The new teams are dealing with it, so
Mm-mm. And wait, I just want to know about, I forgot, Formula One, is there Formula Two, Formula Three? I remember there's a few leagues, right?
there's everything all the way down to like, yeah, there's Formula One, two, three, and then four, and then a bunch of regional other ones. Like there's
Okay.
Formula Ford in the UK, and then like F4000. I don't know where that is, but yeah, there's a
Very
bunch.
cool. But yeah,
Yeah,
thanks a lot, Rayyan, for today. And really learned a lot about this is a sport, right?
yeah.
Gaming is a sport now as well. We know, okay, we're gonna play some Clash Royale later, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
we got to.
Okay.
Yeah,
But yeah, thanks, Rayyan, for today, and hope everyone had a nice time and learned something in this stream. And have a nice day, everyone. Good evening, Rayyan. So
yeah.
yeah, see you. Thank you, Rayyan.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.